One of the first questions that prospective clients ask is, how much does an accessibility audit cost for my digital asset? And I let them know that the cost is going to depend on multiple factors. And we'll touch on some of those factors in a moment. But then I let them know that mostaccessible.org audits range between $2,500 and $7,500. And I let them know this range simply to give them a better idea of what they can expect to pay. And it doesn't have to be between $2,500 and $7,500. Sometimes the quote is lower and sometimes it's higher. It just depends on the amount of work. For example, today I quoted someone less than $1,000 for an audit, and that's simply because there wasn't that much work involved. Now, I also inform clients that we usually charge between $150 and $350 per page or screen. And so if a client has a scope in mind, then this gives them a really good feel, a really good idea of how much their quote will be. And a way to get a more conservative estimate is to multiply $275 by the number of pages or screens that would be included in the scope. And then so here you have a really good idea of a custom estimate for your digital asset. Now, obviously, that is a wider range, right? There's a $200 spread there. So there are multiple factors, as I mentioned earlier, that are going to influence this price. So the factors include the number of audit environments, and let's just take the simple example of having an audit conducted solely on desktop or having the audit conducted on both desktop and mobile. So obviously, if you add a mobile environment, that's going to increase the cost of the audit. Similarly, if you have more elements and or if your elements are of higher complexity, then that's going to add to the amount of work that goes into the audit. So let's say we have a very plain page, it's a privacy policy page where it's mostly just text and there are headings, but there are no interactive elements. Well, that's going to be easier to audit, so it's going to cost less versus let's say you have a page with a chatbot and there is a pop-up and there is a form field and there is a mega menu. Well, it's going to take us more work to go through all of those different elements. And those elements, some of them are more complex than others, but they are dynamic elements. So that is going to lend to a higher cost. And then there's also the state of accessibility. So this is something that when we are scoping to determine the final quote that we're going to give to the client, we're also going to take into account how many accessibility issues that we are coming across, and if the digital asset is in a poor state of accessibility, then there are going to be more accessibility issues that we need to report on. But if the accessibility is fairly good, then it will be less. So that can also be a factor in the final audit quote. But now you have a much better idea of how much your accessibility audit will cost. If you need a quote or more information on an accessibility audit, you can visit accessible.org/audits.